Welcome everyone to my first mod review about the second most ever downloaded Hui4 mod, Kaiserreich. If you haven't been living under a rock for the past 5 years, you probably heard of it. Maybe you have even played it and perhaps you either got obsessed with it or disillusioned about its supposed greatness. I sit somewhere between those lines and in this video I'll tell you why. So, let's first talk about the most obvious thing. The world map has changed. Kaiserreich imagines a scenario where the Central Powers were victorious in World War I and we take up the torch of any country in the usual 1936 start date. This will be kind of an explainer segment, but I'll of course state my opinions as well. Let's start in Europe. France, Britain and Italy all collapsed to civil wars, with the latter currently being put on hold. All three are now syndicalist, which is one of the 10 new ideologies. Speaking of new ideologies, there are 10 ideologies in total, but they can be grouped in 4. Totalism, syndicalism and radical socialism can be grouped into the socialist ideologies. Totalism is centralized and militaristic socialism. Radical socialism is any socialist ideology that isn't either of the other two. And syndicalism is basically labor union socialism that got a foothold only because of the failed Bolshevik revolution in Russia. Speaking of Russia, Kerensky has a lifespan of about 5 days each game, and otherwise, with a puny focus tree, Russia is kinda just the Eastern Front country. Social democracy, social liberalism, and market liberalism are in the liberal ideology group. I feel these are pretty self explanatory. Social conservatism and authoritarian democracy are in the conservative ideology group. Social conservatism is IRL conservatism, and authoritarian democracy is basically that, a partially democratic system with social conservative values and capitalism. Finally, paternal autocracy and national populism sit in the reactionary ideology group. They are both dictatorships, but national populism has ultra-nationalist beliefs as well. Back to Europe. Britain is allied with France in the French-led Third International, one of the hot new factions, and it's basically the Allies without the British puppets, and instead of democratic, they're syndicalist. Then let's look at Austria-Hungary, or I guess the restructuring of Austria-Hungary. As you can see, all parts of the empire are separate countries, although all are Austrian puppets. I have no clue how Hungary in any universe would have agreed to more than Austria and Hungary being constituent countries of the empire, but that's the case here. And for some reason, only Austria has a focus tree. Seriously, why don't any other countries in the empire have focus trees? The Austrian focus tree is pathetic as it is, but come on, at the very least Hungary would need one. This isn't the non-existent Hungarian patriot in me speaking. Hungary just kind of exists as it is now. Its fate is just to get killed by Austria when they don't like some reforms, so Hungary is free real estate and not much else. All Austrian puppets would need focus trees in my opinion, because all could be made interesting. It's not like Austria has much of a purpose either, they just renamed the Austro-Hungarian Empire faction to the Donau-Adria-Bund for no reason, then joined the German-led Reichspakt. This is where a dev of Kaiserreich, Matoro, comes into the picture. I had a lot of issues and or questions about Kaiserreich, its lore and design choices, so whenever I complain about something, most of the time you'll hear the explanations as well. Austria-Hungary existing as a faction is due to how much the empire sucked in World War I IRL, and Germany often had to help them out, so relations weren't very good. Anyways, back to the review, continuing with Germany. Germany, on the other hand, is a whole another thing. In the most recent patch, which is also the release version, Germany's focus tree went from meh passable, I guess, to a smorgasbord of content. Seriously, this is vanilla Soviet tree material times 5 and I'm all for it. What I'm less excited and more annoyed about is how goddamn many events there are. This is TNO levels of making the game into a boring ass novel, but instead of it being about the Nazi succession quarrel along with whatever Himmler is doing in Burgundy, it's about the German election. I know what some of you are going to say, I don't have to read events. That is very true, and I usually don't when the text is the height of my screen, but it's still incredibly tedious to click away one or more of these per day. So the new plethora of events makes Germany basically a chore to play. I'm sure it's very fun and extremely detailed, but this many events has made it much less appealing for me. Again, my issue is not with the content of the events, but their frequency. The reason for a chaotic early game Germany is that the devs intended to making the player feel like they are controlling a chaotic state in progress of falling apart. Can confirm it does feel like that. The German Empire is the leader of the faction that has evolved from the Central Powers to the Reichspakt. I'd say it's a mostly realistic faction in a victorious Central Powers scenario. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is in effect, and Germany got to puppet Belgium too. Pretty much half of Europe is Germany's puppet now, with varying levels of content. For example, if you play the United Baltic Duchy, the only source of joy you'll have is when the Russians kill you, as it doesn't have much content. Or, on the other end of the spectrum, there is Ukraine, which has a great atmosphere and feel to it. All I don't know is how the revolution works and how to get rid of the hetman, but that's on me. Also, one more thing for Germany. There is a worldwide stock market crash in the beginning, pretty much temporarily destroying the economies of non-socialist countries called Black Monday. My issue is, why the hell is it a fucking card game? It's the definition of unnecessary. Sure, some might find it fun, but to me it's tedious and isn't explained well. And by not well, I mean at all. The devs, or to be specific, Eugenis, wanted to make Black Monday an original experience instead of just periodically making it less bad with focuses or decisions. I agree that it's definitely more original, but it is the same amount of confusing and infuriating as it is original in my take. Then there are the Balkans too, not that much different really, mostly the same except the Ottoman Empire is back. You know, standard Balkan stuff, Serbia is small and hated by everyone but can be incredibly strong, and generally everyone hates everyone. There is also Jerusalem, which you literally can't play, but more on that later. What I don't like in the Ottoman Empire is that you just get declared on by literally everyone around you and good luck, I suppose. Africa is mostly alright too, until you notice this blue blob that I like to call African France. It's where the non syndicalist elements fled to in the French Civil War and faces a ton of problems. You barely have any corps as the French Republic, let alone enough forces to retake metropolitan France. That's still your ultimate goal, however. I wasn't able to retake basically any of regular France, as the Third International usually has a ton of divisions, and you, as the exiles in Africa, don't, and neither have your faction mates. Mittel Africa and by extension German East Asia are basically just resource bitches for Germany and not much else. I mean, there aren't really any pets, so not that much value in playing them unless you're a fan of RP, I suppose. Asia is also the usual China in 800 pieces and Japan just being Japan. Similarly to the Balkans, everyone hates everyone as usual. Some have more content, some have less, but there's a unique country I just have to mention here, the Mingan Insurgency. If you select it from the interesting country screen, you will see that you don't exist. And that's right, you actually spawn in as a government in exile. You then kill a few warlords and eventually reclaim China. If that isn't at the very least intriguing, I don't know what is. In America, Canada is the Dominion of Canada, despite them not being a puppet of anyone. Canada also leads the Entente faction with remnants of the old British Empire. That's because during the British Civil War, the royals fled to Canada. The US is the same on the surface level, but it's gonna have a foursome of a civil war like Spain. Canada can create New England out of the chaos and even intervene. There's also the Patagonian Workers' Front, which I haven't played myself, but is a fan favorite. The Second Weltkrieg, or Second World War if you don't speak German, takes place on basically the same fronts as in vanilla. It's the Reichspakt versus the Third International and Russia. Also, the Entente will declare on the Third International at some point, and that's about it. Although this time around, instead of the Germans blitzkrieging everything, the Western Front isn't moving much, as the French army isn't a pile of garbage. An interesting thing about Kaiserreich's World War II is that there is no democratic faction. Well, since there is no canon, I suppose there can be, but by default, neither the Reichspakt, neither Russia, nor the Third International is any kind of democratic. Also, it's left up to chance whichever, if any, bloc the USA joins because of the Second American Civil War. I think this world, this scenario can be and is incredibly interesting. However, I miss the canon. What I mean is that after 1936 there just is no canon. More lore would be so much more fun and insanely interesting, but it just kinda stops at 1936 and after that, make it up yourself. The reasoning for that is that majors intentionally don't have hugely different content, like France doesn't have a national populist path, in order to guarantee that the Second Weltkrieg will start and will occur between the same ideologies, or at least ideology groups. So, in some sense, there is a vague canon after 1936. Also, there are a lot of turned off features. The historical AI toggle isn't even used. Speaking of unused mechanics, many mechanics that are in vanilla aren't used in Kaiserreich. These include the historical AI Iron Man mode, which somehow can corrupt saves apparently, releasing countries, puppeting in peace conferences, and even justifying war goals. These can seem very restrictive, because they are, but I don't have any justifications actually. Historical AI is unused because there are barely any paths in this mod, at least in the focus trees there aren't. Mostly paths are usually handled by events for some reason. I would personally prefer path choosing via the focus trees. The devs would disagree with me on that one. They feel events give more flavor and the player feels more in control and doesn't just watch a 70-day timer tick down until something happens. Can't say I agree with them fully, but at least I understand. Puppeting in peace conferences is disabled similarly because that's handled by events. But I don't get why. I mean, yes, you can liberate a friendly government with the event, but so could you if you release them normally. The only upside I can see to this is that sometimes you can get claims on states or can give it to a friendly country, but otherwise it's just unnecessary not to let us puppet in the peace conferences. If you choose to maintain the occupation, you get a lot of debuffs, more than I think you should. In my conversation with Matoro, it turned out that I actually got the reason right. There can be more options with events. Now, not being able to justify war goals, I got no defense for. There is no canon after the start date, so there shouldn't be any restriction on going against the non-existent canon either. You can justify after the Second Weltkrieg starts, but the world has gone to shit by that point, and you still cannot manually join a faction for literally no reason. Well, I guess you're saved from your enemy taking sides with the Reichspakt and locking you in a lost cause or something, but still. All this doesn't mean that there aren't any new mechanics. Of course there are. There's the Phalanster International, the IEDC, and Mitteleuropa, and all basically economic unions aiming to strengthen their own group. There are many decision mechanics as well, like the clusterfuck of the German election, or the Konspiracja in Serbia, or the revolution in Ukraine, among many others. Thankfully, they didn't touch the research tree. I'm grateful for this because I can easily get lost in research trees. Route to 56's is acceptable, and that's where I draw the line. If it's more complex than that, that's some major negative points. I also highly admire the fact that they included a focus tree for almost every single starting and pop-out nation. They made the rather weird choice of not giving Hungary one, but Jerusalem, which you literally can't play, does have one. But still, the effort is highly commendable. Also, what I mean by literally can be played is if you start a game as Jerusalem, you will immediately get an event which just makes you play the Ottomans instead. You'd just be absorbed into the Ottomans anyway. This country is just a mind boggling mess. Why Jerusalem has a focus tree lies in originality, as it basically acts as a timer for the great anti Ottoman crusade. It could have been just a mission ticking down, but a focus tree is a lot more original, which I'm inclined to agree with. Fun factor can vary heavily from country to country. As I've outlined, some countries are really immersive, some would be with 5% of their events, and some feel like Paradox made them 7 years ago. Here I was originally going to outline some specific countries playing experience, but I would have taken away the discovery from you, and it wouldn't have been all that useful, not to mention that this video is long enough as is. So instead, I'll say that I can feel the sheer amount of dedication years of developing a mod can bring. Almost every country in the whole world has content, and the majority being rather extensive. Some countries have surprising amounts of atmosphere. Some of these gems include Ukraine and the Mingan insurgency. These countries with actual established atmospheres feel like a lot more attention was paid to them than, let's say, Canada. All in all, Kaiserreich can be and is an incredibly fun and intriguing experience, even to players like me who like focus trees better than event swarms. And if you play more polished and recently updated countries like the aforementioned Ukraine and Mingan insurgency, it becomes even better of a time. In conclusion, Kaiserreich is clearly an extremely polished mod that stood the test of time and is deserving of a lot of praise. It does have its shortcomings, like taking away basic game features, but the sheer amount of content altogether can keep you occupied for a good few hundred hours in my estimation. Here would be the is it worth it segment, but of course it is, it's free. But of course the score stays. Based on what you heard from me in the last 15 minutes, I give Kaiserreich Legacy of the Weltkrieg an 80 out of 100. And with that, thank you for watching this far. Drop a like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.